Hello. So today I just wanted to film a short video on the topic of utopias. Now, you had a reading assignment related to this from Karl Popper. And on this particular issue, I would say I am less interested in you learning and remembering specifically what Karl Popper has to say on these issues, than that you're just familiar with the terms and what they mean and sort of how they relate to political theory. And so that's what I plan on going over today. So first, quick definition. A utopia is an imaginary perfect place. And so to be classified as a utopia, it needs to be both of those things. It needs to be both not real, and the term utopia literally means like non-existing or not a place. So it needs to be not real, and it also needs to be ideal. That this is someone's vision of what a perfect world would look like. Now, utopianism sort of goes back very far in the history of political theory. Probably the most famous utopian work is Plato's Republic, which was written, over 300 years BC. And we are actually going to be reading some excerpts from that later in this class. But right, the idea is you create a fictional perfect society as a way of asking questions about how things should be, of sort of stepping out of that framework and the constraints of the real world. And as I said, this exists in political theory actually long before the term does. The term doesn't come about until Sir Thomas More introduces it during the Renaissance. But you have writers doing this sort of work. Now, the point of utopian political theory is supposed to be that by first describing what an ideal society would look like, that will give us a better idea of how our real society measures up, where we're doing well, where we're lacking, and maybe give us some sort of guidance as to how to improve. Plato, again, one of the early authors to sort of use this genre, described it as first you have to build the yardstick. Right? And that's the idea of a utopian theory. Is the utopian theory is meant to sort of set a yardstick. And it's meant to sort of break you free of the assumptions and constraints of your current society. To say, okay, leave all of that aside and let's just say, in a perfect world, right, what would a political system look like? What would gender relationships look like? What would economic relationships look like? And let's just talk about that and gain an understanding there. Now, there's a lot of debate back and forth, and this is something that Popper gets into, as to how useful utopian theories actually are. And for now, I'm more interested in you understanding what they are and what their authors are trying to do than really coming to any conclusion about whether they're sort of a good use of our time or not. The other term I want you to take away from this section is dystopia. Now, a dystopia is the opposite of utopia. It's imaginary, it's a terrible place. It's a fictional, terrible place. And again, if you've read any young adult literature in the past decade, you've probably seen quite a bit of dystopian literary work in terms of things like The Hunger Games and Divergent and several other series along that line, right? The idea of creating a fictional and often in literature at least set in the future society in which things have gone terribly wrong. And again, it's meant to give us a way of reflecting on our own society and where there may or may not be some similarities there and what we want to worry about in terms of paths we don't want to go down. And so I hope that makes sense to you. Again, for now, I just want you to be familiar with these two terms and where they fit in and what the goal is in terms of using them in political theory. So long.